The Honourable Nanaia Mahuta.
Mr Chair, it gives me great pleasure to be able to speak to the Vote Māori Development. The Chair of our committee has aptly summarised the report. However, if one were to look in further detail at the issues confronted by the Māori Affairs Select Committee and indeed throughout the country with relation to the most important factors affecting Māori development, then we would simply hinge this particular discussion around the framework that the government has used to address Māori development. In He Kai Ki Aku Ringa, there are 6 goals. Those goals in part align to what one might expect Te Puni Kōkiri to be doing. However, we only question the significant areas of the vote affected. I raise the issue of He Kai Ki Aku Ringa because Goal 1 is probably one of the most fundamental elements of what is going to help propel Māori development, and that's our people, our kids' education, lifting skills and training. I was somewhat disturbed by the lack of contribution, certainly in the vote estimate debate, by the Minister about how he saw the contribution of TPK going forward in this period to lifting Māori participation in education, especially in the early childhood area. I raise that also because one of the most topical debates right now is around the reorganisation and restructuring of Kohanga Reo, which is a significant contributor to positive advancement of our children on a Māori medium language pathway into education. The Minister was absent in terms of his contribution in the space before the Select Committee. Secondly, the committee spent some time investigating the issues around whānau ora, and more particularly with regards to the Office of the Auditor-General report. 43 million has been transferred to whānau ora commissioning agencies in this vote, and the questions of the Select Committee were quite simple. Was the Minister satisfied under Phase 1 that enough had been done to evaluate whānau ora as an initiative in order to make that substantial decision to transfer the funding obligation to these whānau ora commissioning agencies? The Auditor-General's report helped the questions at Select Committee level. We were concerned in a number of areas. Firstly, it was very difficult to define what whānau ora is. So if it's difficult to define what it is, how can you evaluate the outcomes? Now, people who are well versed in this particular area will point to a whānau outcomes framework and a shared outcomes model. But the question is quite simple. Did Te Puni Kōkiri have confidence that the Phase 1 evaluation gave them sufficient confidence to be able to make the transfer to the whānau ora commissioning agencies? When I asked the CE of Te Puni Kōkiri, did they raise any risks with this decision? The CE nodded her head and said yes, risks were raised with the Minister. We'll come back to that particular point. The second point was, in the Office of the Auditor-General's report, one of the insights that she had observed, noting that there were innovations in this particular model, was that in order to shift the funding framework model that is currently adopted and used by the Ministry of Social Development, the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Education from individual to collective outcomes, that was going to be a significant challenge. And in fact, Te Puni Kōkiri recognised that as well. So that remains an issue for the government to confront, that if the aspirations of whānau ora as an initiative to work towards shared outcomes, whānau-based outcomes, then that would require those other ministries to change their funding framework model. And that was highlighted in the report. The other aspect was the success of the WE plans that were in the Phase 1 stage of the model. Those members who have travelled throughout the country and visited with various of these whānau ora providers would have heard numerous bits of feedback about how successful this particular part of the whānau ora initiative was, because it allowed whānau themselves to be able to identify some of the outcomes they were seeking at a very small level. And so being able to coordinate services and collaborations around whānau to be able to address the issues in the WE plans became fertile ground for learning about how to improve service delivery. Interestingly enough, In the phase 1 evaluation,
The
Mr. Chair,
Honourable Nanaia Mahuta.
interestingly enough, in the phase 1 evaluation and the transfer to the forward funding in this vote estimates, the We initiative was actually not picked up. It was only the navigator component of the whānau order funding. Insofar as that is concerned, here is a question which remains for the Minister to respond to. Those whānau order providers that were successful in phase 1, who have not been funded in phase 2, can the Minister explain why that has occurred and whether he is satisfied that the network of services, especially in rural areas, can be achieved as a result of the inequity of funding towards navigators in this space? The Minister of Māori Development, I think, is putting his mind to this particular challenge because he knows, like we know, that the whānau order commissioning agencies have not addressed this issue and that there are significant gaps, especially in rural areas, about how whānau order providers can significantly meet the obligations of their whānau when they're not getting the same flow through of funding through the Navigator Fund. Mr. Speaker, I'll come to the issue of treaty settlements. I agree that the post-settlement unit provides ample opportunity to assess the positive implementation of a number of treaty settlements throughout the country. Notably, just last week, the iwi Leaders Group with Local Government New Zealand had announced a high-level agreement, a memorandum of understanding, which I think foreshadows just how beneficial some of the mechanisms within treaty settlements at a local government level will have a positive impact in the area. However, can I say this? It is probably salient at the front end of the discussions if co-governance and co-management with local government is going to work, that local government are included in some of those particular discussions, and given that we've got some hefty issues around water, around representation, around procurement of services at the local government level, and also the funding for utilities, infrastructure. If there's a front-end participation and role of LGNZ in that space, then co-investment strategies with iwi could be a really new opportunity to help support regional development. I know that the Minister is aware of all these issues. I am looking forward to the Māori Affairs Select Committee monitoring further the role of the post-settlement unit to ensure that an even-handed application of the mechanisms within treaty settlements insofar as local government is concerned can happen in the way that it's intended to. Mr. Chair, the last part of my contribution is really in the space of housing. There was some 7 million appropriated to the Māori Housing Development Initiative and 4 million to the rural and Māori housing component of the role of what Te Puni Kōkiri currently undertakes. It seems to me that at a local government level there is still an uneven response to the way in which papakainga development can continue, and also the whole resource consenting and planning process can make better provision for this. I know this because I submitted with the Hauraki District Council on their papakainga development plan as well as the Waikato District development plan. There are exemplars throughout the country, but it is not even-handed. Here is a real easy space for the Minister of Māori Development to send a signal to councils that best practice is actually the real opportunity if we want to ensure that Māori can build on their own lands, to be able to provide housing, low cost, to be able to meet some of the real challenges of home ownership amongst the Māori population. Again, the Minister was silent on that. My last point, both Te Ture Whenua Māori and Te Reo Māori have been in absolute shambles. The Minister has had to delay and defer the report back of the bill for Te Ture Whenua Māori because he knows it doesn't meet the needs of those Māori landowners to be able to move their land into a productive space. My colleague Meka Whaitiri is championing that particular issue for our team. On the Te Reo Māori space, the poor old Minister is having to do a bit of backwash to save face for the previous Minister, who made an absolute kibosh of the issue. He introduced the bill at the 11th hour into the House, And with very little, I think, robust consideration around the proposals there. We've had to revamp that. It's going back to Cabinet for further consideration. Poor old Minister Flavel has made a wee mess of it, and he needs to do better in that.
Finlayson.
Chairman, I want to take a call on